November 2, 1743. A man sat in his Philadelphia home, telescope ready, waiting for one of nature's most spectacular events, a total lunar eclipse. He had planned this night for weeks. He was one of the most brilliant minds in the American colonies. And then the clouds came. The wind howled from the northeast. Rain lashed the windows. The eclipse was gone, hidden behind a wall of storm. That man was Benjamin Franklin. And his frustration that night would accidentally unlock one of the greatest scientific discoveries in the history of weather science. This is the story of the Eclipse Hurricane of 1743, America's most scientifically important forgotten storm. Welcome to my channel, Historical Disasters USA. Colonial America in 1743. To understand why this storm matters so much, you need to understand what the world looked like in 1743. The American colonies were a string of thriving settlements along the Atlantic coast. Philadelphia, New York, Boston, all connected by sea trade, all exposed to the fury of the Atlantic Ocean. In 1644, the Reverend John Campanius Holm had created the first American weather records at Swedish Fort near Wilmington, Delaware. But nearly 100 years later, the science of storms was still almost completely unknown. Nobody understood how hurricanes moved, where they came from, or why they behaved the way they did. Benjamin Franklin was in many ways America's first national meteorologist. It is widely known that he conducted the famous kite and key electricity experiment. But Franklin's meteorological discoveries went far beyond what most school textbooks ever describe. He had become fascinated by storms throughout the 1730s, observing ocean temperatures during his Atlantic crossing and noting the behavior of the Gulf Stream. This was a man who looked at the natural world and asked questions nobody else was asking. And on the night of November 2, 1743, the natural world gave him the most frustrating and ultimately the most important answer of his scientific life. The night of the eclipse. Benjamin Franklin was aware that a lunar eclipse would be occurring on November 2, 1743. As an experienced astronomer, he set himself up to view it from his Philadelphia home and was eager to contrast it with how it appeared in Boston, where his brother lived. He asked his brother to observe the event and send him detailed notes. On October 21, 1743, while Franklin was planning to observe the lunar eclipse in Philadelphia, a storm moved in and covered the moon. He observed that the winds were moving from the northeast. The storm is known as Eclipse Hurricane because it struck on the night of a lunar eclipse. The clouds completely blocked Franklin's eclipse observation effort from Philadelphia. Franklin was frustrated but philosophical. He assumed his brother in Boston had suffered the same fate. After all, Boston was northeast of Philadelphia, and the winds were blowing from the northeast. Surely the storm had come from that direction. Surely Boston had been his first. He was completely wrong, and that mistake would change science forever. The storm itself. On November 2, 1743, a severe storm struck the American colonies from Virginia northward. The storm may have been a late-season hurricane or a strong mid-latitude cyclone. Even today, scientists are not entirely certain of its exact nature. But whatever its classification, it was powerful, destructive, and far-reaching. The storm affected what would become the northeastern United States and New England, bringing gusty winds and rainy conditions as far as Philadelphia, and producing significant flooding in Boston. The central barometric pressure of the storm was measured at 29.35 inches of mercury. This storm, which hit the American East Coast and reached Philadelphia and Boston in late October and November 1743, was the first tropical storm in American history to be studied with scientific tools. Harvard professor Jonathan Winthrop recorded the dip in barometric pressure as the storm passed over Boston, making this the first storm in history in which barometric observations were recorded. He also carefully noted the rise in sea level and the behavior of the winds during the storm's passage. Think about that. For the first time in recorded history, a scientist was actually measuring a storm as it happened, not describing it after the fact. Measuring it, Professor Winthrop at Harvard and Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia were, without knowing it, inventing the science of meteorology in real time. Franklin's discovery. After the storm passed, Franklin did what great minds always do. He started asking questions. Franklin had hoped to observe the start of the eclipse from Philadelphia, but the storm with unusually strong northeasterly winds rolled in an hour prior and obscured his view. Later, Franklin learned that the eclipse had been visible in Massachusetts, where the storm arrived long after the eclipse started. This puzzled Franklin deeply. The winds were coming from the northeast, and Boston is northeast of Philadelphia. He had assumed the storm traveled from Boston toward Philadelphia, but it had actually traveled in the opposite direction. In a letter to Alexander Small of London, Franklin described his experience. The storm cloud in Philadelphia had blocked his view of the eclipse. He had assumed the storm had blown in from the northeast because the surface winds at his location were from that direction. He was puzzled to find out later that his brother in Boston had viewed the eclipse with no problems, and that the storm arrived there 4 hours later. 4 hours later, the storm hit Philadelphia first, then moved northeast to Boston 4 hours afterward. But the surface winds were blowing from the northeast. How could a storm move against the direction of the wind? Nobody had ever asked that question before. Nobody had ever had the data to ask it. After researching storm with northeasterly winds, Franklin discovered that storm begin to the leeward, the direction in which the winds are blowing, and move windward against the wind. This was a revolutionary understanding of how weather systems actually behave. Franklin's insight helped scientists recognize that storms are organized systems with structure, circulation, and motion, not just clouds pushed along by the wind. In many ways, the logic behind today's radar loops and forecast model can be traced directly back to Franklin's careful reasoning in 1743. Every time you check a weather app on your phone, every time a meteorologist on television shows you a storm track, every time a hurricane forecast saves lives by telling people to evacuate, that science traces its root back to one frustrated man sitting in Philadelphia, staring at cloudy skies where a lunar eclipse should have been. The confirmation 1749 hurricane. Franklin did not stop at one observation. He continued gathering data for years. Franklin's observations were confirmed by another hurricane which traveled up the east coast of the colonies in October 1749. Franklin was able to trace that storm's entire path by carefully comparing newspapers' accounts from various cities along the storm's route. Using these newspapers' reports from multiple cities, Franklin traced the 1749 storm's progression and confirmed his earlier conclusion. The storm moved up the coastline and its motion was entirely independent of the local surface winds. Benjamin Franklin essentially invented storm tracking using nothing but colonial newspapers. No satellites, no radar, no computers, just newspapers, a map, and one of the greatest minds America has ever produced. This storm never killed thousands, but the science it sparked has protected millions. That is why it belongs in the history of American disasters, not for the lives it took, but for the lives it saved. Legacy. The Eclipse Hurricane of 1743 was the first storm ever measured with scientific instruments. Benjamin Franklin studied its forward progressive movement, and that single observation launched the entire field of hurricane science. The most significant hurricane of the 18th century would be the hurricane of September 1775. But the scientific tools used to understand it existed only because of the groundwork laid by Franklin's 1743 observations. Today, NOAA, The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration tracks every storm in the Atlantic Basin. Satellites watch hurricanes from space. Forecast models predict landfall days in advance. Evacuation orders save thousands of lives every hurricane season. None of that would exist without the chain of scientific thinking that began on one cloudy November night in Philadelphia in 1743, when a frustrated man turned his disappointment into a discovery. The Eclipse Hurricane of 1743 did not level a city. It did not kill thousands. History barely remembers it. But it changed the way human beings understand the sky above them forever. Benjamin Franklin looked at a storm the way he looked at lightning, the way he looked at the Gulf Stream, the way he looked at everything, with curiosity, with patience, and with the belief that the natural world had answers if you only asked the right questions. One cloudy night in 1743, he asked the right question, and the world has been safer because of it ever since. If this story showed you how one forgotten storm changed the entire world of science, hit subscribe, because on Historical Disasters USA, we don't just tell you what happened, we tell you why it still matters today.